Welcome to our video on creating a safer space. According to the research, a safer space is an environment where students' abilities, experiences, and perspectives are heard, explored, and celebrated. Through crafting a safer space, students are set up to excel in their learning and growth and to feel comfortable and engaged. We asked youth, what does a safer space in the classroom look like for you? Here was their response.
Hello, my name is Nola. My pronouns are she and her. I'm 17 years old and I live in Vancouver, British Columbia. And today I am going to be answering a couple of questions that will hopefully clarify how we can make talking about sexual education in the classroom more equitable and inclusive. In British Columbia, which is pretty exciting because I live in BC. Anyways, so the first question is, what does a safe space look like for me in the classroom and how can we implement that? And one of the first things I thought of was community guidelines. Now, these can be classroom rules, classroom guidelines, however you want to word it. But what it can do is let us know either each student or majority of the students' boundaries, what they don't feel comfortable with, what they do feel comfortable with, what they need to feel heard, what they need to feel respected, what they need to feel safe, and, tools and ideas of how we can, move forward from someone feeling unsafe, or what can we do when someone says something that makes a student uncomfortable or a teacher uncomfortable. With these set rules, guidelines, however you want to word it, it's something to look back on when you have a bump in the road or you want to remind a student or just the classroom, these are what we want to achieve. It also, I think, makes students feel safe to know that everyone else knows what they feel comfortable with.
While it can be difficult to adapt our language and perspective, it is essential to create a welcoming, safe, and inclusive environment for the youth entering the classroom. But how can this be done? Safer spaces are intentionally crafted using a variety of safer space building factors. While it may depend on the group you're working with, here are some strategies that may help. Before each lesson, you may consider putting up the agenda for the class. This can help students know what the class will be centered around and may prompt them to consider the preparations they need for the lesson. Creating group guidelines together is a great way to establish expectations and define what helps make a space safer for youth. This also helps with sharing power between youth and adults, as youth have the opportunity to share their voice on what goes into the guidelines. If space permits, you can think about arranging desks or tables in a circle. This strategy helps to diffuse the power from the front of the classroom and can be especially helpful when discussing more challenging or vulnerable topics. Some information and the supporting student help guides and curriculum may be triggering for students or educators. Providing advance notice of sensitive subjects, such as gender-based violence, can allow students the chance to consider any extra needs they may have. Depending on your comfort level, being mindful of students' behavior during the lesson and creating safety plans for students who may need to excuse themselves can validate any feelings of fear individuals may have going into the lesson. If it's feasible, try to plan your lessons before a break in the school day, such as recess or lunch, and not a major school break like winter, spring, or summer break. So students can speak to you in private or follow up with a school counselor or other professionals if needed. As educators, remember our responsibilities around student disclosures. Finally, using a trauma-informed approach in your lessons can reduce a lot of risk associated with diffusing difficult health topics. You can find a resource for this in our supplementary PDF guide. You can also use activities like the snowball activity or step into the circle to build vulnerability and connection within the classroom. You can find instructions for these activities in the supplementary PDF guide. There's a fine line between informing students about potential dangers and scaring them. While it's important to provide students with educational information, this is best done through an approach that avoids instilling fear. It can be challenging to find this balance when discussing sensitive topics in the supporting student health guides, such as the legalities surrounding the age of consent in Canada, grooming, sextortion, and sexually transmitted infections. For example, graphic images are often used as a scare tactic for STI prevention. This can be both unnecessary and potentially traumatic for some people. An approach that could be tried when discussing safety online could be saying something like, most of the people on the internet are not bad people, but just as there are dangerous people in the real world, there are also dangerous people online. It is important not to exaggerate to scare students. Remind students that they will continue to have difficult and important decisions to make about how they use the internet, because they will have more and more access to the internet as they grow up. An adult ally helps youth amplify their voice through meaningful engagement. With the support of an adult ally, young people can be meaningfully involved in every stage of an initiative. Being an adult ally to young people involves a combination of positive attitude, skill, and awareness to help in advocating for a youth leadership and empowerment agenda. A genuine youth-adult partnership involves shared decision-making power where youth feel empowered and involved. Youth-adult partnerships are strong and trusting relationships that help youth to be understood, for example, their needs and their interests, which in turn helps to implement effective strategies adapted to the unique needs of the youth they're working alongside. Some strategies for promoting an adult-youth partnership include asking questions of youth before making plans. You can work to gauge where a class is at and revise a lesson as necessary. For example, defining gender, sex, sexual orientation, stigma, and body image. Checking your own negative assumptions about youth or the topics you're covering can help provide a non-judgmental space where youth can feel comfortable asking questions that they may have. Involving youth in plans and decision-making can allow youth to feel heard and seen, as though their opinions matter, which can lead to better overall engagement. Try adding elements to your lessons such as games, guest speakers, jigsaws, films, cartoons, debates, graphic organizers. In fact, try anything that will allow the students to become active participants rather than passive observers. In order to build inclusivity within the classroom, it is important to recognize relationships outside of the heteronormative lens. The heteronormative ideology refers to the idea that there are only two genders, and they are each associated with roles that match their assigned sex at birth. It also refers to the heterosexual relationship as the norm and what we're supposed to desire. However, we know that many individuals identify outside the gender and sexuality binary. For example, lesbian, gay, bisexual, non-binary, transgender, gender non-conforming, genderqueer, two-spirit, etc. Inclusive language can feel daunting at first and requires commitment and time. Making small changes one at a time can quickly make a difference. Furthermore, there are many resources available to help you navigate more inclusive languages. Here are some tips for framing things in a more inclusive lens. Using gender-neutral language. Use terms such as folks, y'all, people, male identifying, female identifying, instead of guys, girls, male, female. Use the word partner instead of girlfriend, boyfriend. Another tip is not to assume someone's pronouns or misgender them. So unless a student has told you their pronouns, use they and them. If someone has expressed their preferred pronouns, follow that. And it's never a good idea to force people to say their pronouns. Use diverse examples. Use a variety of relationship types, man-man, woman-woman, women non-binary, instead of always using gendered examples like Sophia and Mark, Lauren and Benjamin. Try using gender-neutral names like Charlie, Cameron, Riley, Parker, Morgan, or Arlo. And also use gender-neutral pronouns like they, them, instead of she and her, or he and him. And it's okay to make a mistake. So how do we apologize for misgendering someone? We can say, I'm sorry, I meant, and correct their name and pronoun. And keep your apology brief so it doesn't become about you and your mistake. How to correct misgendering when you see or hear it. You can say things like, I noticed you use she to refer to that person. Just to let you know, they use they, them pronouns. You can also model to others that a correction can be done in a friendly way, and it's important for respecting and including gender and non-conforming individuals. And as always, you can find more resources in the supplementary PDF guide. Responding to the unexpected. Students may sometimes ask unexpected questions or disclose sensitive information when introduced to sensitive topics in the classroom. Here are a few tips for responding to difficult questions or situations. If you receive a difficult question, you can ensure that you have understood the question the student has asked by saying, "What I hear is that you're curious about blank," answering the question, then asking, "Did that answer your question?" This open communication allows the chance to see if the student has been satisfied. If students still have questions, or if you don't feel comfortable answering a specific question in that moment, you can let the student know that they are good questions and that you will find good answers. Seek support and answer the questions during your next lesson. You can also provide the class with an anonymous question box and ask them to write questions or one thing they learned that day without writing their names. Since everyone's writing something, students can feel safer asking questions. If possible, keep the question box available so that students can ask questions that arise later. And remember that you can always revisit a topic at a later date if you find a better way to answer the question. It's important to understand that it's okay not to know an answer to something. In fact, this is an opportunity that you can take with your class to find an answer that's credible and reliable together. If a student discusses a relationship issue in their own life, it's important to show that you believe them and not to minimize their concerns. However, it's also important not to jump to conclusions, as the other person in the relationship may have a very different perspective. This is especially important if both people involved are students whom you may interact with. Provide students with specific instructions for accessing resources and supports. For example, contact local health authorities to get current phone numbers and websites for resources, or show students how to get to the closest resources on foot, by bus, and so on. While students may want to discuss more ordinary relationship problems, if a student tells you about a relationship issue that seems abusive, be aware of your responsibilities around disclosure. It's important to remember your duties as an educator. The Child and Family Community Service Act requires that anyone who has reason to believe that a child or youth has been or is likely to be abused or neglected must report the suspected abuse or neglect to a child welfare worker. Thank you for listening and see you in the next video. As always, for more information and resources, please see the supplementary PDF guide.